So, I mean, there's an awful lot to cover here, and we normally do this talk in the summer term, but we wanted to get conversations started a little bit earlier. So it's going to be a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. I will occasionally pause and look pleased with myself. That will mean I've made a joke, and if you could laugh at those moments, I would appreciate it. It will lessen the tension in the room. So I think one of my key takeaways for year 12, and if you take nothing else from this talk, is this. The key question here really is, who do you want to become? So what cognitive skills and thinking frameworks do I want to develop? How do I want my brain to change? What social skills and networks do I want to build? What doors do I wish to open through which qualifications or which experiences? So that might mean university, it might mean employment, it might mean some of the other options which I'll be going through. And something I want you to have in mind also is, what will be my utility in a changing, challenging world? As I was sort of planning this, I was thinking, it sounds very cerebral. Body, mind and spirit though. It's all of those things. It is the self. It is society, workplace and industry, all of these things coming together into what your life actually looks like. And if you can be a little bit tactical and really think about that, you're likely to find yourself in a more satisfying position in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. I think it's worth talking a little bit about some of the great disruptors. Now, this was a slide that I wrote last year. There are significant other disruptions this year. You are entering university and you'll be entering the workplace during what a lot of people are calling now the fifth industrial revolution. That's AI. So that is likely to be significantly disruptive to how workplaces and society operates. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it does mean it's a big shift. The career ladder and those sort of ideas around that is a little bit of a relic at this stage. It comes from the early 20th century. If we think about neoliberal financial initiatives and how they affect universities, that is a big change. So parents, as you're advising your young people, that's a shift that has happened, which I'll talk about in a minute. The post-COVID world is different. We've got the intergenerational wealth gap. In the 1960s, people in their 20s had more of a share of the national income than people in their 60s because they were in work. That trend has been reversed. So intergenerational value divide is, I mean, 'twas ever thus. Every generation has different values from the generation before. And a biggie is the intergenerational cognition dichotomy, as I've coined it. Young people with smartphones, young techno-natives have different brain structures from their parents. That is a huge shift in the nature of humanity that we need to be thinking about, as parents and as teachers, as we're advising people, and as young people, as we're sort of looking towards the world. Because you, young people, will see things differently from us older people. And you are the people who are going to be forming that world as you go through it. So it means working with and competing against AI. A big tip from me is upskill your humanity. When you're thinking about how to do life in your early 20s, what can you do that an AI won't be able to do? What are your human skills that you can future-proof? In terms of the career ladder, we often talk about squiggly careers. So agency, like your freedom and your choice in terms of how you approach your career, as opposed to loyalty to a particular institution that will employ you for the next 50 years and then give you a gold watch when you retire. Those days are gone. But that gives you an awful lot more freedom. It's a double-edged sword. Higher education benefits you financially, so the government won't pay for it. That's neoliberalism. Housing. The cost of housing is a significant thinking point as you go through life, and I will be raising some talking points to families around that because I think it's important. There are vastly more / vastly different options available to school leavers than in the past, and parents, I want to flag some of those up to you. If we think about how people approach their careers, millennials have been much more values-based. Gen Z, the data is showing, are making much more savvy choices than millennials in terms of career and degree strategies. So there's a fiscal savviness in your generation that wasn't around in my generation. That probably has an awful lot to do with the fact that you are investing tens of thousands of pounds into your degree. So you're looking at it as an investment, whereas for people 30 years ago, a degree was something that, you didn't cost you anything, and you went and did it for a few years and then worked out what you wanted to do with your life. There are skill shortages in the economy. The industrial strategy needs an update. So things are things to be thinking about in terms of how you skill yourself. Various international and political shifts are going on. So think about that when you're thinking about your future. But some fallacies and some wrong-headedness. AI is probably not going to bring about fully automated luxury techno-communism. You're probably still going to have to work for a living. The idea that you won't need to know stuff because AI will know it for you is also wrong. In fact, I would argue that a degree is potentially more important than before. Because if you're using AI to crib your work for you, it will occasionally say something like, noted expert on gender studies, Andrew Tate. Because he is very mentioned in terms of gender studies, doesn't mean he's an expert. The AI doesn't know that, you need to know that. So the AI will make mistakes. Think of it like a grad student. You need to have enough expertise to know when it's talking nonsense. I don't like this idea of you will work 5 different types of career in your life. I don't think that's true. You might work in different institutions, you might adjust your career, but I don't think we completely rewrite our career pathway multiple times. I think that's a fallacy that gets said. I've also heard many, many times that first-year engineering modules are already obsolete by the time you graduate. That is complete nonsense. No, it isn't. Concrete is concrete. Rebar is rebar. Maths is maths. It doesn't become obsolete within 3 years. So I slightly worry about why people might say that and why they might be discouraging people from learning stuff. Degrees are a bad financial investment. That will be true for 1 in 5 people, according to current data. That means for 80% of people who have a degree, they are better off for having had that degree. So bear that in mind. An issue I find, and I found this particularly in the last probably 5 or 6 years in my career, young people are increasingly wanting degrees to be totally sort of vocational. I want to be a social worker, so I'll do a degree in sociology. That's not how you become a social worker. I want to work for a business, so I'll do a degree in business. Everyone works for a business. So do please be a little bit more open-minded than that. It's not a simple sort of ladder vocational lily pad to lily pad thing. Big changes in recent years, according to you, because you can read all this stuff on your own time a little bit, because I have limited time here. Personal statement reform is one, which I will talk to you a little bit about. I would say, however, that the personal statement reform is not much to write home about. I don't think there's any real difference. Universities will need to restructure. They are in a bad financial position, and that is also neoliberalism for you. They have been investing in overseas students, and now the overseas market has fallen out the bottom. So universities will be doing some restructuring over the next few years. That's for certain, and that's lots of universities. Big cognitive challenges, and again, I'll let you sort of think about some of these things. Very low uncertainty tolerance in the modern world. If you don't know the way somewhere, what do you do? What do you do if you don't know the way?
Ask for directions.
Ask for directions? No one does that. What do people actually do? Look at your phone.
No, I ask for directions.
But as young people, we look at the phone, we use Google Maps. Yeah? If you were in the middle of nowhere and you didn't know the way, you used to guess. You used to think, it might be this way, it might be that. Well, I'll have a punt. Is the answer A or is the answer B? And as a generation, you are much more used to just being able to look up the answer and have that certainty straight away. So this is a big issue, and it affects young people in particular, but it's also an issue for older people. I'm decorating my house, so I'm Googling what colour should go with this. Rather than making a human decision and just sort of looking at pictures and deciding, I'm thinking, no, there must be a correct answer. Google, tell me what colour to paint my wall. Life career pathway is not linear or straightforward. It doesn't work like that. And one thing I would say, to you young people and to parents is this is a truly adult decision. So parents, let them make it, and also don't do it for them. So during the course of for example, if it's university in particular, if they're applying for university, I want to be dealing with the student. I don't want to be dealing with parents or grandparents, because they need to apply to university. And if they can't apply to university, that tells us something. It's really important that young people are given that agency and that responsibility at this stage. We cannot rescue them. They need to be responsible. That doesn't mean I don't have a big old crook that I pull people along with. I absolutely do, because of course we are dealing with young people and sometimes we need a nudge in the right direction. But parents, please don't do their applications for them. They need to be filling out those forms themselves, because they'll have to do it at university. And if they haven't learnt it on their way to university, they're going to really struggle to deal with the level of adult responsibility that is suddenly thrust upon them. So, post-sixth form option pathways. You've got the undergraduate degree. Most people go down that pathway, but that's obviously not for everyone. There's the elite university course and pathway, and Miss Morris has a lot of input with that. International university, that becomes less straightforward for us. There are other agencies that we can call on if needed. But yeah, we're very supportive of international university pathways, and especially now that British universities are so expensive, it's an increasingly interesting avenue to look down. Now, the newish one is the degree apprenticeship. Now, these are highly sought after qualifications. They take about 6 years to complete, and it's part-time work, part-time study. They are very, very, very competitive. So young people who don't really know what they want to do, I'll probably do a degree apprenticeship. I'm not going to get onto that degree apprenticeship course. It's very, very competitive. You have to really want it, and you have to be very independent in that application process. Now, you've also got the additional qualification. You might do a TEFL course and teaching as a foreign language, sports coaching. There are some really good business admin courses. There are a whole range of one-year courses and all that kind of thing that you can look at doing. Full-time employment, gap years. I'm not going to talk loads about gap years today, but young people who go to university after a gap year academically outperform those who don't have a gap year. So parents, please don't put your children off having gap years if they want one. They will get a better degree if they have a gap year. Until the age of 25, an older brain is a better brain. It's more developed. So the idea that they're going to forget how to learn over the course of a gap year is nonsense. And of course, a gap year looks like all sorts of things. You've got the school placement, you've got work, travel, volunteering, internship. Sometimes it's just paid work for a gap year in order to have some savings to enter university with. Then we've got the level 2+ apprenticeships, on-the-job training. Miss Ash is quite keen on starting one's own business at the age of 18 or 19. I am not keen on that idea, but you have very little to lose at this stage. But I would suggest there's an element of hubris in anyone age 18 who thinks that they can start a successful business. I would go and work for a business and see how it's done first, personally. But okay, so I'm going to talk about university. So if we think about why university, it is about opening doorways, gaining a degree that can get you started with your career. But I think it's also about developing a particular set of cognitive skills. If you're going to be studying something for 3 years, you have an opportunity to develop a real cognitive framework. I can remember one of the boys last year saying, "Oh, Mr. Mew, I'm going to give you a few examples of work and I'm going to see if you can tell which is AI and which isn't." And I could immediately tell. And he said, "Well, how can you tell?" I said, "Because I have a degree in English. For an awful lot of stories, I know what humans don't sound like." It was an instinct, because that's how my brain has been trained. So the old do a degree to open the door to a career, fair enough if it's free. But if you're paying £9,000 a year, I want you to really think about the cognitive skills that you're going to develop. And there's kind of no point spending that money on something that you're not going to really try at. Gaining expertise in a subject area. I like the phrase, by the end of my degree, I'll be able to. Thinking about, as I say, who are you going to become? And of course, building a set of transferable skills. Not to mention the social side and all that kind of stuff as well. In terms of the application pathway and the timeline, it looks like this. And this is one of those big things of, let's put this on your radar so you understand where we're going. So summer term, and indeed now, researching universities and courses. Open days, virtual open days, visiting cities, visiting universities, also setting up your UCAS account in the summer term. You'll be making long list decisions about which courses to apply for, and you'll be learning about entry requirements and courses. Also, I will be having a one-to-one with all of you to talk through your options and highlight things. Over the summer holidays, this is your opportunity to continue that wider reading and research and shortlisting your options and completing your first draft of the personal statement. And autumn term is the redrafting process. There will be some university courses that have additional tests and exams, so taking those, you will need to book onto them often in the summer holidays. And I'm going to say this again during the course of the talk, but you need to look at the universities that you're applying for. You need to look at the courses you're applying for. You need to check the entry requirements. If there is an exam that a particular institution needs you to take, the person who needs to find that out is you. The information is not covert, is not hidden. It will be on their entry requirements page. You need to read it carefully. I do not know the entry requirements for every single course at every single university. You need to do that research and you need to find out which exams you need to take. And you need to book yourself onto them. That is your responsibility. End of autumn term or middle of autumn term, beginning of autumn term if we're really lucky, from about October, sending through UCAS applications. I aim to get them sent off before Christmas. There's always a couple that are a little bit after Christmas, but they're in my naughty book. Spring term of 2026, that's when you'll be receiving your offers. And then around this time next year is where you'll be choosing your firm and insurance choices. So choosing which universities you're hoping to go to. Of course, summer term next year is your final exams and assessments. August 2026 is results day. So key Westonbirt staff, there will possibly be a few little alterations to this. There's a bigger group of you, so there may be a little bit of restructuring in terms of my role within this, because it's a bigger group and we might need to sort of divide the labour a little bit. But I am the university's advisor. Mrs. Churchill is the acting head of sixth form. I've put first names down because that's how email addresses work. Hannah Ash is the head of sixth form and careers. Miss Morris will be head of year 12 still, but academic enrichment and early applications. So early applications are for things like Oxbridge, dentistry, medicine, veterinary science. Mr. Balderson is the deputy head academic. And of course, tutors, subject tutors, house staff. It is a big team effort. If you're applying for an art foundation course or an art degree, the best people to speak to about that will be in the art department. They won't be me. Of course, I'm also involved in these conversations, but if you're thinking about maths or engineering, maths and science teachers will have all sorts of insights that I don't know about. So please use the range of staff that are available to you. We've talked about key dates, so I don't want to sort of go through this too much, but I'll leave the slide there so you can read it on your own time. But two of the key dates, October the 15th is the deadline for Oxbridge and medical applications. If you give it to me on the 15th, you might still miss the deadline because, of course, there's an in-house process that has to take place as well. So you need to be ahead of these deadlines. My nominal deadline for schools to be sent off is November the 15th. So if all of you hand me the first draft of your personal statement on November the 16th, there probably isn't time for me to process all of those between that date and the end of term. We aim to send them off at about November the 15th, which means that you need to be going through the school process before that. The true deadline for applications is January the 25th. Yeah. So school procedures. I've talked you through, but just a couple of points to highlight. Applications workshops, thinking about that. So I'll be talking to you about personal statements next term. Identifying application criteria where we can, where I'm talking through things with you in those one-to-ones. But yeah, I put it in bold here, pupil responsibilities. Identify the application criteria, including exams. It's really important that you're on top of that. Okay. So one thing that frustrates me sometimes is if a particular student is given some advice, they then pass that on to one of their friends as if it's relevant. All advice is tailored to the individual receiving it. Context is absolutely key. So I say there's no such thing as a good university. I never use the term good university. I do use the term competitive or less competitive university. But if you're a student, for example, who doesn't do well under exams and is much more project-based in terms of your learning habits, you might be coming out with really top grades. But a university that has a very exam-focused assessment criteria is not going to be a good university for you. You're not likely to be successful there. You're likely to find it very stressful. It's not a good university if it crushes you. It's what is appropriate for you. So it's really key. And so I'm very hot on this in terms of how staff are talking about it. We don't talk about universities as good or bad because it's what is right for you. We don't push an agenda. So like school figures on the percentage going to Russell Group, which is the more competitive universities, they're not a consideration when talking to an individual. And indeed, often a really competitive individual will prefer a less competitive university for all the right reasons. I went to University of East Anglia, which is not a Russell Group university, because it was one of the 2 universities in the country in those days that did creative writing, which is where my passion lay. A couple of years ago, we had a student who's a top student, 3 A stars. The world was her oyster. She chose Holloway over Exeter because she preferred the course there. Absolutely fine. If that's what's appropriate for you, it doesn't matter. Non-university routes are also valid, and we really push that parity. And we will support those non-university routes. Non-UK routes are supported, but your future is yours. You need to be researching it carefully and thinking carefully about it. Studying something that you can be passionately interested in for 3 years is probably a good use of your time. I know it's more expensive than it was 20 years ago, but I still believe that. But thinking about what skills and qualities you're developing over the course of that degree, I think are an important way of thinking about that investment. I often think to myself, who's this person going to become in 5 years' time or in 20 years' time when I'm talking to people about their future? But I'm really aware that a lot of life is very whimsical. Very chance, very minor happenings dictate an awful lot of what happens. I was talking to a student and her parent earlier this year about university applications, and the parent, the student was really agonising about certain aspects of it, and the parent said it doesn't matter. Where you go to university, what course you do, it's not that important. You're going to live your life. And so much of your life will happen outside of work. Now, I try not to have it doesn't matter approach, but I am aware that a lot of what dictates your decisions will be quite whimsical, because that's how life is. The head of drama, and I think it's at UWE, he's retired now, so University of West of England, very, very renowned lecturer, world renowned. He got into drama because when he was an undergraduate, he saw a pretty girl handing out drama flyers, and he wanted to meet her. He never met her, but because she gave him a flyer, he then became a world-renowned academic in drama. That's how life works. And I think probably everyone in this room can think of examples like that. And probably, certainly, I would imagine everyone over the age of 30 can think of one minor event which has completely shifted how their life looks, who they sat next to one day. Student finance. I don't want to bore you too much with student finance. One thing I will say to parents is that the maintenance loan is means tested. So students with the highest degree of maintenance loan will receive £10,000, just over, and students with the lowest amount will be south of £5,000. The threshold for getting more than the minimum is really low. If you're on a household income of 40 grand, I believe you're at the minimum. So that's about a £5,000 difference. I'm not a maths teacher, it's a bit more than £5,000. So the government is expecting parents to contribute. Just saying. Now that might look like you giving them free food and accommodation over the summer while they save really hard, because there will be students who don't have that luxury, but the government is expecting financial contributions from more affluent parents, and you don't have to be very affluent to be meeting that minimum threshold. Repayment calculations. There is a student finance calculator that you can look at, and a repayments calculator. One thing I will say with, no, I can't go backwards, damn it. One thing I'll say with student finance is, and I say this, I caveat to the best of my knowledge, but to the best of my knowledge, it doesn't matter if you borrow £1,000 from student finance or £60,000 from student finance, your monthly repayments will be the same. Now, if you take out a very large loan, you're likely to be paying that off for the next 40 years. I've gone past the slide which has the rates, annoyingly, and I can't go backwards, but the rates I think are relatively low, relatively okay. It's like having a phone, an extra phone. I would be thinking of that as a graduate tax. Now, given that this is a private school, there will be parents who are thinking, obviously we will be paying the fees, we will be investing in that stage of our child's education. We didn't have to pay for university. Why should they have to pay for university just because the economy crashed in 2008? I would like you to think about house deposits, because a student loan might become a house deposit if it sits in a savings account. I'm not giving you any financial advice whatsoever. I'm not an independent financial advisor, but I want to float that for family decisions if there are decisions like this, because if you're thinking about how to advantage your child's start in life, what degree of loan they take out and how that might be used is worth considering. But one thing is, might I choose to do a second degree? And if you're going to choose to do a second degree, can you get a second loan? Questions like that need to be asked. So, but I'd like to sort of put that out there for parents to have a careful think about. So, what to look for in a university course? Where are we for time? So, you've got the TEF Teaching Excellence Framework. This is a measure not of how good the research is at a university, which is one of the older fashioned measures. It's how good the teaching is. So when this framework first came out, a lot of the most competitive universities, well, they had an excellent reputation for their research. Their academics were writing the best books, were doing the most interesting things. But the teaching wasn't necessarily very good. Whereas lots of less competitive universities, they weren't leading the world in research, they were there to teach young people. So when it first came out, the most competitive universities tended to get bronzes, whereas the less competitive universities often got gold. That trend has changed a bit over the years since the TEF has been implemented, but it's a really important thing about your university experience. Going somewhere where one of the top academics in the country is lovely, but are they going to teach you? And if they are going to teach you, are they any good at it? Other things to think about are modes of assessment, as I said. Are there access arrangements? Do you need them? I was at a steering committee meeting a couple of years ago with various representatives from UCAS and universities. And we were talking about more competitive universities and those very difficult exams that they make people sit. And one of the representatives, I think he was from Bath, said, universities will not have the luxury of staying as they are when it comes to assessment. So in terms of young people's mental health outcomes, there have been some fairly robust questions asked about how rigorous the exams are and how much pressure is put on young people. And people will have a variety of opinions about that, but I think that's a quote that's worth sharing. Entry requirements is a really important filter used by universities. If you are predicted 3 Cs, there's little point in applying for a university that will require 3 As as an entry requirement. So A-level predictions and GCSE results. Are there required subjects? Are there required GCSE grades? They will be looking very carefully at that. And in terms of extenuating circumstances, which is part of the new reference, I have a whole box on extenuating circumstances for those who need it. Universities, if they require a grade 6 in maths at GCSE, a grade 5 in maths and an extenuating circumstance is not as good as a grade 6. If they want a grade 6, they want a grade 6. So there's sometimes a bit of flex, and you can ring the university admissions lines. And something to tell you, young people don't like using the phone. They're not used to it. Different generation. So as parents, please feel free to support them in making those phone calls to admissions numbers, because young people really struggle with that in my experience. For me, I think, well, it's not that deep. You just pick up the phone and speak to a human. But this is a national phenomenon. It's been noted by UCAS. Please feel free to support your young people in making those phone calls. But ring the admissions numbers. Ask them questions. They will be as helpful as you like. So I would say, think about how competitive your courses are. When you get to apply to 5 places. You get 1 personal statement. And it goes to the same institutions. So UCAS is basically the most streamlined university application system that exists anywhere in the world. 1 personal statement sent automatically to the 5 universities you choose, and that's that. America, you have to write an individual essay or 2 or 3 for each university you apply for. Whilst I think of American universities, I will put this out there. If you've heard of it, it's more competitive than Oxford by a factor of 10. They are hugely competitive, the American universities. That doesn't mean that the ones you haven't heard of aren't good. They are. There's loads of amazing American universities, and they are very generous with their sports scholarships. So if you're being given offers for a really good sports scholarship for an American college, that's really worth considering. I would recommend that when you're choosing your universities, you go something like this in terms of entry requirements and predicted grades and all that kind of thing. 1 or 2 ambitious or aspirational universities, 1 or 2 reasonable, yeah, about on the money, and 1 or 2 safe, where you're a little bit above their entry requirements. That would be my recommendation. What to look for? Location, location, location. Campus or city. I went to a campus university, and I cannot imagine going to a city university. Some people who go to city universities can't imagine going to a campus university. But I think that's one of the biggest questions you need to ask yourself. Do you want to be on a campus where there's, especially in your first year where you're on campus, there's that village-like feel to your university experience where it's all self-contained? Or do you like that more metropolitan feel? And why wouldn't you if you go to school in the middle of a field? Thank you for laughing, much appreciated. But so this little diagram here, if I imagine that we're about here, lots of parents insist that their children do not go anywhere within the red circle, because otherwise you'll be doing their laundry every week. Lots of parents say, no, we're outside of that circle, because I don't want to have to drive that far every time you come home. I put that out there as an example, but as you like. Look at this, when you're looking at university courses, like different university courses offer really different modules. So, I went for University of East Anglia because it offers creative writing as part of its course. That's what I wanted to study. It also, but the same with any university. If you're wanting to study engineering, what sort of engineering? what's quite interesting in terms of a lot of how these courses have changed over the years is, if you think about how engineering was 20 or 30 years ago, you know, you're making engines, you're designing bridges, you're maybe thinking about civil engineering. Engineering courses now frame themselves very much as, we're going to save the world through engineering solutions. You lot all met my mate Pete, who is saving the world through water engineering. So different courses are very different. You know, English at one place is very different from English at another. History at one place is very different from history at another. And the same applies for engineering, possibly maths. So look really carefully at the modules. Look deeply into those courses. Don't just sort of say, oh, I like the sound of that university. Okay, but what are they teaching you there? What scope of choice do you have at that university? Are you a student who's going to want 20% absolute freedom? Because there are people who do biology degrees who get 20% where they can do a module in creative writing, do a module in history if they want to. So again, look carefully at those universities. Older universities, more established universities tend to have less flexibility. Newer universities tend to have a bit more flexibility. Now, in terms of earning potential, the IFS did a big old study on this a few years ago. So they found this in short. Subject choice has the greatest impact on earnings, over and above which university you attend. So graduates in high-paying fields like medicine, economics, or engineering tend to earn more than people in fields like humanities and creative arts, regardless of which university they attend. Institutional prestige matters, it does, but less than expected. Prior academic performance influences earnings. So when we think about people at the most prestigious universities, usually they get the highest grades. Usually that's because they're the smartest and the hardest working. And when you factor that into the university they've gone to, that institutional prestige effect really diminishes. Really smart people who go to a non-Russell Group university are really smart graduates, and they do well in their careers. Now, they might get a little bit more of a bump if they've gone somewhere more prestigious. That there is an effect that's measurable, but it's not that big of an effect. So I don't want to push people into going for a university prestige thing over the course they want to do. Now, presumed reasons for earnings gap, networking opportunities. This is a big reason to go to university, and there are generally better networking opportunities at more prestigious universities. Networking means meeting employers, making a network of friends and colleagues who can influence your career later on. You can't see it because my face is blocking it, but prestige as a signal. So if you've gone to this particular university, it's often used as a signal of academic and intellectual potential. So there is a little bit of a recruitment bias around these things, but as I say, it is minor. Some case studies just to sort of flesh out how we've worked. In 2018, our highest performer, 2 A stars and an A, received 4 rejections and went to study in the Netherlands. In 2020, school leaver applied for a social work degree after a well-spent gap year, volunteering with vulnerable people in Brixton. She rang me up a couple of days before results day and said, Mr. Mew, you know how you said I told you so if I didn't apply to uni? I was like, well, go on. And she said, well, yeah, I want to go to uni. I want to study to be a social worker. I said, oh, what's brought that on? He said, well, someone said to me that if you're wanting to like volunteer, don't go to the other end of the earth, volunteer in the UK, because vulnerable people in the UK will give you far more challenge and be far more meaningful in many ways than if you just merrily go off to Africa and other people. That was the advice that I'd given her. So that well-spent gap year, she volunteering with vulnerable people in Brixton, is now a social worker. 2021, we had a reapplication. She was not interviewed by Oxford the first year. She then reapplied in her gap year and got in and has now completed her degree at Oxford. 2022, the brightest student in the year attained a degree apprenticeship at Unilever. And again, I say degree apprenticeships are very competitive. 2024, reapplication to dentistry successful. So bear in mind, things don't always go your way the first time round. There is that. So the 5 choices, I say long shot, aspirational, somewhat secure, reasonably secure, and absolutely safe is the way to do it. I slightly reckon that 100% success rate for applications probably means we're not being ambitious enough. If you've got 5 places that you've applied for, I'd quite like one of them to reject you, because that means that you were being aspirational. Oh, damn it, I've pressed something wrong. And I can't go back. Anyway, it was stuff about making choices and how all that works. So the 3, I've crossed out personal statement because it's the same thing. They will now ask you 3 questions. 1, why do you want to study this course? That's how I would have told you to start your personal statement. 2, how have your qualifications and studies helped you to prepare for this course or subject? That's what I would have told you to write about next. And 3, what else have you done to prepare outside of education, and why are these experiences useful? That is what I would have told you to write after that. So the personal statement really isn't much different from what it ever was. So the text below that is exactly the text I used last year with the old personal statements, because it's still the case. Basically, what do you reckon at this stage? What do you think about this subject? What do you think its import for the world is, or for you? What is the subject as far as you're concerned? What are your relevant experiences to date? How have pieces of work experience, academic experience, extracurricular activities, life experience, wider reading prepared you for the course, informed your thinking about it? It's really important that you all do a little bit of wider reading in order to prepare yourself to write a competitive personal statement. Filters to entry. You've got the record of qualifications, so that will be GCSEs for some people. Your current studies, your predicted grades, school reference, participation in life outside of lessons. These are all things that universities will be looking at, and different universities will look at them differently. Some of them will only look at predicted grades and probably GCSEs as well. So lots of universities, they won't look at your personal statement, they won't look at your reference, they will just look at what GCSE grades you got and your predicted grades, and they will think about whether those predicted grades look true or not. But lots of universities will read your personal statement very carefully and will read the school reference more carefully as well. So when you're thinking about your careers, think about skills, values, and qualities. So that's what employers are going to be looking for. So the things that you can and should continue to develop throughout your life, obviously you can be developing them now, and you'll be developing them if you go to university or whatever else you do. Qualifications are a metric which you're currently working towards, and it's the easiest gained when younger. Think about the Eastern versus the Western metrics. In places like China and India, qualifications are the only metric. Can you pass these exams? And then that door opens or closes. Over here, we're much more touchy-feely. It's much more qualitative in terms of your qualities and values and how you can signal and demonstrate those. So, useful resources and websites. I'm aware we've got about 10 or 15 minutes left. Flagging up some useful resources and websites. So we've got Unifrog is really useful for you guys. Read recruitment and career advice. CC chatbot, ratemyapprenticeship.co.uk. Do be looking into all of these things. I've got a little TLDR slide of just key points which you can read if you need to. One thing I would highlight there is Mr. Mew is in charge of this process, keep him in the loop at every stage. If you decide to apply and don't tell me, and you decide after the application window, after the January deadline, you can technically apply after January, but it's a bit tricky. If you apply after everyone else and don't tell me that you've done that, and one person has once done that, it's just going to sit there. And sit there and sit there. It goes to me and I have to release it. So please make sure that you're keeping me in the loop there. I say it again, students are responsible for their applications. I am also really happy to have conversations with parents about these things. You won't all want to have a conversation with me, but it's never a great problem. Preferably we do it over Teams of an evening, and I chat to you for half an hour and we can really clarify things. But I would also say, one piece of advice for parents is that, let them choose. If you try and push a young person at this stage in their life down a career path or a studying path that they don't want, they're probably going to end up changing their mind halfway through first year, and you'll have wasted £9,000 on fees, and then they're going to start again somewhere else. Let them choose. But it can be helpful. Sometimes people are wrong, right? So it can be helpful to have multiple voices in these conversations. So if you're feeling at loggerheads, and young people, if you're feeling at loggerheads with your parents, if you're feeling at loggerheads with your young people, loop me in, loop the tutor in, whatever, and we can facilitate those conversations. This is quite interesting stuff, but we haven't got time for it all. One thing I'd like to just point out is stuff around the different ages of universities. We don't have time to talk about this a lot. Bear in mind, the oldest universities are generally the most competitive and the most prestigious, but there have been loads and loads of new universities. Please don't talk to me about polytechnics. They haven't existed for 30 years. It's silly to just be talking about something that doesn't exist anymore. And I don't want this sort of idea of like old polytechnics. If it's the right course, for example, if it's events management, if it's a newer subject which can be really professionally advantageous, ancient universities don't tend to offer them. Newer universities do, and there's loads of interesting innovations at these universities. In terms of 6-way, this is from a 2018 talk, but increasingly, especially post-COVID, you will be accessing university online. Lecture attendance is becoming increasingly optional because they live stream them and they record them. And as they're live streaming, they take a transcript. I can remember when I was at university, there was a particular lecturer who I really struggled to follow. She was very much reading with absolutely zero charisma, and I couldn't process it. I sent her an email and said, I'm terribly sorry, I had a terrible cough, I couldn't hear. Please could you send me your lecture notes? She very reluctantly sent me the notes that she'd read out to us for an hour. That's just part of the course now. So that online university attendance, think about digital nomads in terms of careers, that's university students potentially. Internships are very important. It's one of the key things in terms of career advantages and career pathways. For a lot of you, you'll need to work unpaid for a year or so at the end of your degree in order to gain that work experience that makes you employable. It's a big class discriminator. It's a big issue because one of the questions in terms of certain career pathways is, can your parents afford to pay your rent for a year while you work for free? Skipping past this, I want to talk briefly about apprenticeships. Here we go. Right, apprenticeship routes. The level 4-5 higher apprenticeships are equivalent to higher education certificate or diploma. So that's equivalent to a foundation year or a foundation degree. Foundation degrees are 2-year degrees. A level 6 or 7 is a degree apprenticeship. Like I say, they're very competitive, but they are offered in a huge range of fields. I was really surprised going to an apprenticeship fair to discover that law now do degree apprenticeships. And that will take you to level 7. That will take you to master's level qualification, working at a law firm over the course of several years. But I really want you all to be open-minded about those and consider them. If you are not keen on university and you're keen on entering the world of work, you need to be sharpening your elbows in order to be making a competitive application to a degree apprenticeship. On the plus side, lots of degree apprenticeships don't ask for a personal statement. They don't ask for a letter of application. They make you do tests. And once you've got through a few waves of tests, at that point they will start to interview you. Oh, I've skipped something. The application process for that starts from October 2025. It's completely ad hoc. It's what the business will choose to do. So you need to be looking at sort of Unifrog and Rate My Apprenticeship to see what's available. Reed Recruitment will also probably have ideas around that. But it's a much more difficult pathway because with UCAS, you know what you're doing. It's all there. You put things into the search box, you write one application and off it goes. With apprenticeships, there's loads of them. And they open at different times and they're of different levels and they're in different locations. So it's more complicated. You need to think carefully about them. If you're in a bit of a drifting mode in year 13, there's no point drifting and thinking, oh, I'll probably just do a degree apprenticeship. You won't get onto a degree apprenticeship if that is your attitude. They are obviously different from university. I heard someone on Radio 4 the other day, Evan Davis, one of the presenters, said, well, look, are we saying that, you know, more affluent young people get to learn stuff, acquire knowledge, whereas poorer people get to acquire skills? And I thought, how little preparation have you done for this interview? Because that was outdated, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. The old-fashioned apprenticeships was being a builder, being a plumber. The new apprenticeships are in all sectors. They are in law, they are in engineering. They aren't in medicine because medicine basically is an apprenticeship. You spend some time at university and then you learn from doctors on the job. That's basically a degree apprenticeship. So medicine's always been a degree apprenticeship, I would argue. So there won't be a degree apprenticeship in medicine. But you know, the scale of what is available in terms of apprenticeships, parents, please don't fall into the trap of thinking that, oh, well, that's just for people who want skills. No. Employability skills, yes, but lots of knowledge. And it doesn't have to be a degree apprenticeship. And do bear in mind that, you know, in the modern world, there are loads of ways of being qualified and loads of different forms of qualifications that are available. One thing I would say in terms of qualifications generally is there are plenty of people who are looking to make a quick buck. So if we take the world of sort of sports coaching, you can go and do a degree in that. And over the course of the degree in that, you'll have various modules which will basically be professional qualifications. You probably don't need to do a 3-year degree to do that. A foundation degree probably would give you a good range, and the way in which that's then consolidated in terms of all those different modules, there might be some stuff around sports physio, sports massage, all sorts of different professional skills that you can use. Maybe a degree apprenticeship is a good way to go for that, but equally, maybe not. Maybe just doing a professional qualification. I had a student several years ago who they were very keen that she was going to the University of Oxford Brookes. Yeah, Oxford Brookes University to do a coaching degree. She was going to Oxford College. But Oxford Brookes University was rubber stamping and putting their seal of approval on this qualification. So do think about that. If you're thinking about different sort of professional qualifications, there are some really great ones out there, but there are also some slightly dodgy ones. In terms of a PT, a physical trainer, lots of them now are online. So you're not learning from actual human bodies when you're learning how to develop the human body. That doesn't seem like a great way of getting a qualification to me. Same with TEFL. You know, when I did my teaching English as a foreign language qualification, I taught humans how to speak English. Great way of learning. Lots of TEFL qualifications now. You're working with AI, you're reading off PowerPoints, and you're presenting lesson plans to nobody. You get a rubber stamp, but lots of employers know the difference between that and a real qualification. So, so many different qualifications available, and not just at universities. Lots of them are rubber stamped by universities. That doesn't always mean they're any good. I'll leave you to read up on this stuff because I think I've